As we mentioned in the first chapter of this course, most real estate agency relationships are general agency relationships. Remember, a general agency relationship is established for a specific activity. Real estate agency relationships are usually established for the purpose of one transaction. When a licensee executes an agency relationship with a buyer, the written document will typically specify that the scope of the agency relationship is limited to the broker finding the buyer a home. Once the buyer finds a home, the agency relationship terminates. Let's assume a broker enters into an agency relationship with a buyer to find the individual a new home. The buyer decides to sell their current home. Is the buyer, soon-to-be seller, bound by the agency relationship already established with the broker? In other words, must the individual list their home with the broker whom they've already established an agency relationship? No. The scope of the existing agency relationship is limited to the broker finding the individual a new home to purchase. It does not include the sale of the individual's current home. The individual would be absolutely free to find another broker with whom to establish an agency relationship with the purpose of selling their existing home. Let's review another example. A broker and a potential buyer establish an agency relationship aimed at finding a buyer a new home. The broker assists the buyer in finding a new home, and the buyer closes on the transaction. The buyer later decides to purchase another home. Does the buyer still have an agency relationship with the broker? No. The agency relationship ended when the buyer found a new home. If the buyer and broker decide and agree to enter into another agency relationship, it will be a completely separate relationship with a separate written agreement establishing the subsequent relationship. The same analysis would apply to an agency relationship with a seller. If a broker forms an agency relationship with a property owner with the purpose of selling the home, once the home is sold, the agency relationship terminates. Death or incapacity. It would seem intuitive that if one of the parties to an agency agreement dies or becomes otherwise incapacitated, the agency agreement terminates. While this is not true with all contractual relationships, the personal nature of agency agreements requires the individual to be capable of performing their duties under the contract. Remember who the principal is and who the agent is on a real estate transaction. The principal is the buyer, seller, tenant, or landlord. The agent is the principal broker, not the sales agent. If a sales agent who is affiliated with the principal broker dies, what happens to their agency relationships? For example, if the dead sales agent had a home listed, is the listing still valid? Yes. The agency relationship is between the seller and the principal broker. The principal broker would either work with the seller directly or assign another sales agent to work with the seller. Let's take the same scenario with the sales agent who lists a home for a seller. The principal broker dies. What happens to the listing? The listing is terminated because the listing was established through the establishment of an agency relationship between the principal broker and the seller. The seller is free to list with another broker. The sales agent may want to affiliate with another principal broker and attempt to relist the property through their new principal broker. Destruction of the property. If the property, which is the subject of an agency agreement, is destroyed, the agency agreement is terminated. For example, if a listed home burns down, the parties are no longer obligated under the listing agreement. A property which is condemned is treated the same way as if it was destroyed for the purposes of an agency agreement. Remember, condemnation is the process by which a government authority takes possession of a property to further the public interest or public good. Using our listing example again, if a listed property is condemned, the listing agreement on the contract would be considered terminated. Neither the principal broker nor the seller would be obligated further under the terms of the listing agreement. Expiration. All agency agreements in real estate must have an expiration date. Once the expiration date arrives, the agency agreement terminates. If the parties both agree in writing, the agreement may be extended. Breach. As we have frequently mentioned, both parties in an agency relationship have certain duties to each other. If one of the parties fails to perform their duties and fulfill their obligations under the agency agreement, the other party may cancel the agreement, thereby terminating the agency relationship.